Welcome to my final presentation called Culturally Relevant Teaching Strategies for Native Alaskan Students. This presentation will cover a broad spectrum of topics in relation to education for Native students. The following four subjects that you see on the screen are those that I'll cover more in depth as we go along. I cover them quite extensively in my paper, but we're just going to talk about them briefly. First, we'll start with the history of education in Alaska, then cultural values education, effective teacher education and preparation, as well as some basic classroom strategies. So first, I want to talk about the inspiration behind why I chose this topic. First of all, I love kids and I love going to school and I love classrooms and learning and just all the things that go into teaching. Second, I've grown up in Alaska and I hope to teach here someday, so teaching the people of Alaska is obviously a topic of interest to me. And number three, I visited a lot of villages and I want to learn more about the current education system and what's being done to improve it. So through my research, I've learned a lot about what goes into the educational system in the village, as well as different things that they're doing to improve it. And so that's what a lot of this is going to be about. But first, we're going to start with the history of education that gives us a background of previous systems and then how it's become the shaping force of today's structure that is developing. So prior to the arrival of the Europeans, education was not a organized system. It was just simply subsistence and survival skills being passed down through the generations, just the things needed for living, basically. Then prior to the purchase of Alaska, meaning that would be after the arrival of the Europeans, the Russian Orthodox religion worked in the southern part of Alaska, the Aleutian Chain, Southeast, and Kodiak Island to teach native children reading, writing, and math, the basics, and they actually did quite well, teaching them both Aleut and Russian language. Then in 1884, the Organic Act required that the Office of the United States of the Secretary of the Interior be responsible for educating children of all races. So this demanded that they educate Native students as well. And so they did this by contracting religious denominations to run boarding schools across Alaska for the Native students. And that was not a successful thing, but it continued for many years. Then in the early 1900s, Alaska Natives were given the right to create their own village governments and constitutions, allowing freedom, a little bit more freedom in education. And so that's what we've kind of come out of and that we're working in. So that kind of shapes what we're looking at. So now we will go ahead and move into the next topic, and that is talking about just relevant education and how it can take place, but then the things that get in the way. Here you can see listed language and cultural differences between students, parents, and staff, learning materials that don't relate to the native way of life, differences in learning styles between students, standardized tests that don't account for language and cultural differences, the lack of educational role models, alcoholism, abuse, neglect, and things like that at home, poverty, low self-esteem, indifference towards education. All of those things can get in the way of an effective education. So what can counteract these barriers to education? It needs to meet students and communities where they're at and embracing their culture. So by including the basic core values of a culture into their education, students are learning in an ethical and culturally logical manner. So here you see listed by the McDowell Group some general Native culture values, not specific to any region, just kind of a broad overview. So you're showing respect to others, sharing what you have, knowing who you are, having patience, taking care of others, living carefully, honoring the elders, and seeing the interrelatedness of things. So taking those in mind, we'll look at just some different ways that teachers can incorporate those values into teaching. The Assembly of Alaska Native Educators have designed criteria for culturally responsive students, educators, schools, curriculum, and community. And so they've set up a way that they can incorporate those previous values that we talked about on the previous screen. Students are responsible for memorizing their genealogies, their ancestry and elders, and just being aware of that, as well as practicing traditional responsibilities, especially in the environment. Teachers and administrators will use elders' expertise and use traditional settings like camps and the wilderness and rivers for academic purposes. The next screen will also talk about some ways that cultural values are incorporated into the education system. The curriculum should use the local language for learning, kind of incorporate that into it. And then community members or teachers, they can teach the cultural values that are important to their culture. Culturally relevant schools will create avenues for elders to become involved either in formal or informal setting. They'll allow for opportunities for students to learn the language and embrace their culture. The communities will organize ways for culture to be celebrated and then model appropriate living in the way that they view is best. So the next thing that we're going to discuss is how teachers themselves are being prepared to teach Native students in a culturally effective way. Um, Obviously, for obvious reasons, it would be ideal for Native students to be taught by Native teachers, but this is not really the reality of it, and its evidence shows that there are fewer Native teachers every year. So many of the things that um, could be taught are being missed on because Native teachers aren't teaching Native students. There are some barriers to natives becoming teachers, and that is insufficient financial aid, social alienation, role models that are poor or not there, inadequate preparation for college. In the next slide, we'll talk about how those strategies, since the article that was written, have been kind of helped along. And there's obstacles that are kind of diminishing, but yet we still don't really have a lot of Native educators. So um, there's programs and college courses and degrees that are working towards preparing teachers for becoming teachers in the villages with Native students. And so that looks like practicum, field service with mentoring teachers that know what's going on, that have a really good idea of village life, and it helps them network with bush teachers and administrators, as well as just get a good idea and a good feel for what Native life is, but to learn and appreciate the cultural values and those kinds of things, and just how important that really is. So next, we're going to skim over some basic strategies. This slide shows some ways that community involvement can be involved and can encourage and celebrate culture. So a specific way is asking an elder to come to the classroom and share stories and help on projects or discuss cultural customs, all of those ways that they can come and be a part of shaping the next generation. Teachers can host science fairs, art shows, organize fundraisers, publish weekly newsletters, host community events within the school. Just like in this picture, the student is relating information about her culture and sharing that and passing that along to others. This last slide is some very specific ideas from Native American Indian reservation teachers in Montana and South Dakota. And so you can take some of those basic ideas and put them into a classroom in Native Alaska schools, and they can kind of relate. Um, yeah, so hands-on experiences, small group projects, things that really get the students involved, but also celebrating their culture by teaching both Native and white history and how they coincide. Being just a fair and sincere adult, someone that they can trust, someone that will hold the student accountable, and just incorporating culture into the classroom, the things that they think are the most important parts of their culture. So those are just some specific things. As you can see there, um, I cited all of my references within the paper, but at the end I'll show my references as well. Uh, just to conclude, I really want to express how important developing an effective educational structure is. Just one of the most important things that is going on today. Like I had in one of the first slides in the beginning, I was talking about how the way of an education starts is how the um, how the future of a student is shaped for the rest of their lives, and how important education really is for the future of Alaska and Alaska Natives, and just really our global community as well. To conclude, I just really enjoyed reading all the reading that I did for this project and gathering a great deal of useful information that I hope to utilize and further um, just involve in my education as I go through the education classes through UAS and just onto my teaching career in general. Just as I know that I'll have students that are Native Alaskan in my classroom. Just an exciting field and just so many opportunities for growth and development and research and implementation and just all of those things coming together. So thank you for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone else's work as well.